Emails from the Trump team back in the lead up to the inauguration in 2020 apparently show that their plot to stop the certification, to stop Joe Biden from becoming the president, had a secret little card up their sleeve, and he's standing right over there. They appeared to think that on the SCOTUS, they could count on Clarence Thomas to save them, to buy them the time they needed to overthrow American democracy. We're gonna give you excerpts from some emails that were part of 8 that lawyer John Eastman sought to shield from the January 6th Select Committee. And you're gonna find out very soon why he didn't want them to get these emails. A judge did order that they be released, which is why we're getting these excerpts right now. So here's one. This was sent on December 31st, so this is a week before the insurrection, saying we want to frame things so that Thomas could be the one to issue some sort of stay or other circuit justice opinion saying Georgia is in legitimate doubt. So not that it wasn't. They knew that Trump had lost Georgia, but they thought Clarence Thomas, we could probably get him to pretend that Georgia's in doubt. And then after we do that, then if that one gets thrown out, then none of the votes really count, not as far as Mike Pence will be concerned. And then the whole thing can topple. Thomas could end up being the key, one of the lawyers ended up saying. It could be our only chance to get a favorable judicial opinion by January 6th, which might hold up the Georgia count in Congress. Eastman responded, I think I agree with this. If we can just get this case pending before the Supreme Court by January 5th, ideally with something positive written by a judge or justice, hopefully Thomas, I think it's our best shot at holding up the count of a state in Congress. And so why? Why were these two different lawyers so sure that Clarence Thomas could be their savior? I mean, after all, Clarence Thomas, as far as I can tell, hadn't said anything publicly about the big lie or election fraud. Clarence Thomas has very rarely spoken in the last few decades. So what would have given them the idea that Clarence Thomas would agree with their conspiracy theories about Georgia? Well, I can't say for sure. What I can say is that the January 6th committee did talk recently with Ginny Thomas, the same Ginny Thomas that while she was messaging basically everyone that could potentially interfere with the election, did contact John Eastman. So she also talked to Mark Meadows and state lawmakers and a whole bunch of staff and all that. But the wife of Clarence Thomas was contacting one of the two lawyers on these emails. It is possible that that's all disconnected from this revelation. It's also possible, I would say likely, that it's not disconnected. That maybe she was wrong, but she gave them the idea that Clarence Thomas would potentially give them the judicial framework or foundation necessary to stop the election certification from going forward. Anna, what do you think?
I think that this is the kind of stuff that leads to distrust toward our institutions and opens up a window for people to start getting radicalized with conspiracy theories and all sorts of nonsense. The reason why people don't trust our institutions is because of this kind of gross corruption that goes unchecked. Someone like Clarence Thomas should have already recused himself in deciding cases involving the big lie in January 6th. For instance, he was able to participate in a decision having to do with a subpoena that Senator Lindsey Graham did not want to comply with. And that subpoena requires him to testify in Georgia in regard to the phone conversations that he and Trump had with the Secretary of State there, which, of course, one of the calls was with Trump basically telling him to find 11,000 votes so Georgia can go to him instead of Biden. Anyway, luckily in that particular case, the Supreme Court finally decided that Graham must comply with the subpoena. But even though the ruling was the correct ruling, I still think Clarence Thomas should recuse himself because of the fact that his wife was very much entrenched in this garbage plot to overturn the election.
Yeah, and look, so we have to bear in mind both the good and the bad from the point of view of Clarence Thomas. So Clarence Thomas did not step in and stop the certification if that was even possible. So that's good. On the other hand, he has, as you just were saying, he's gotten involved in this to protect Donald Trump. He's already stepped in to try to shield disclosure of certain documents and things like that. And so, yeah, he should 100% be recusing himself. But again, like the idea that he would recuse himself because of a clear, obvious, repetitive conflict of interest, that's a norm. And the norms we've learned will not save us. No one is gonna comply with any of this stuff from the right. They will maybe comply with the law, even though usually not that. The norms, no. Civility, no. Common sense or decency, no. That's not how it works. They want power, they're acquiring power, they're gonna hold on to power, and that's pretty much it. Anyway, maybe someday we'll find out what the January 6th committee thinks about their meeting with Ginny Thomas. For now, she's off pursuing her conspiracy theories and trying to stop democracy, I guess. That's how she's spending her later years.
You know, sometimes I feel like Clarence Thomas is hell-bent on punishing us, like broadly speaking, the left, because of the fact that anyone would dare to try to hold him accountable for the sexual harassment allegations against him. But then I look at his life and I consider how unpleasant his wife is, and maybe his entire life is one big punishment. So yeah, that gives me. Yeah, I mean,
he's pretty rough too. I think they both could do better. But anyway, yes, maybe that's a little bit of karma, I suppose.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.